Okay, well, we should be live. Well, I'm going to try to get to the YouTube stream that I started, but hello, everyone. Welcome. Maybe some of you are coming from the discussion that I just had on Steve McRae's channel with Chris Silvius. I know, RJ, you were watching. What'd you think?
Oh, it was kind of what I expected. It didn't surprise me that poor little Chris goes off on tangents galore and doesn't really discuss the fossil record. So he comes right in with the soft tissue stuff and that. And I was putting stuff in the live chat. We discussed that in rocks. We discussed that in rocks. We discussed that.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. The you can tell. The other thing was the number. In addition to your facepalm moments, where you're going, oh, everyone was amused at that. But the fact is that how out of his league he was on any of the systematic material. That when we finally got around to hearing some stuff on the data floor, he doesn't know anything about that. He didn't know diddly, and so he's completely at sea.
Yeah, I would have actually, because he brought up the whole ancient DNA thing at first, and I was honestly hoping we'd actually talk about it because we could talk about Neanderthals and Denisovans and even the remains of DNA in fossil elephants and horses and things, and how that shows relationships to modern animals rather than separate Barrowmans. But we didn't. We never picked that subject up again. It was just lost to the wind.
No, at the area that he revealed one thing up front, which was so delightful that he actually relies on Kent Hovind, and a secondary bit about that Dover whirlpool thing. And so a question that I wanted to get in, but it didn't get into the Q&A, would have been to have asked
Again,
him.
It was just lost to the wind.
What sources did Kent Hovind offer for the claim? And of course, an honest answer would be none. So how could you check the none to find out whether it's valid? And then the weird circumlocution of logic. I'm putting the video, by the way, in the tip data field because it's highly relevant, and it's relevant to cite it in volume 2 along the way because it is bringing up into the Q&A polonium halos and all of that. So that would have been to have asked him.
It was just lost
when he has the weird worldview that, of course, we should use regular geology that makes correct predictions, even though it's completely wrong. But we shouldn't be worried about the fact that young Earth creationism is completely incapable of making any correct predictions, even though it's supposedly right. And that there's
yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of a bizarre ending to the discussion, where he says we should leave the science to the scientists and
I went, what?
And let them keep working with an old Earth. And I was flabbergasted, which is why I even asked what was the point of the debate then?
Yeah.
What was I communicating?
Well, another revealing thing was his reliance on Walt Brown. Because remember that Kent Hovind is a Walt Brownista, right, and gets not everything, but huge blocks of his apologetics directly from siphoning off the claims of Walt Brown. Right. So here, basically, you've got this multi-layered daisy chain of Silvius relying on Kent Hovind, relying on Walt Brown, none of whom have bothered to fact check any of it.
Yeah, I've honestly, I don't know about you, RJ. I've never heard the whirlpool claim before. Have you ever heard?
And it's very probably only in that tour. Remember, Kent is a bottom feeder, but once in a while he kind of riffs on things on his own, like the broccoli matter and all of that. Right. And so that when left to his own device, he's going to, air quotes, think, and the results ain't going to be pretty.
Yeah, it's, I think that think is maybe too strong of a word. It's
like I put in quotation marks. I put in air quotes.
It's like neurons bashing into each other,
But for my standard rule, the very fact that he was relying on Kent Hovind for anything instantly means he's an unreliable source. Silvius has no clue how to deal with stuff because Kent Hovind is off the map, even by creationist standards, off the map. And that's telling us a heck of a lot.
Yeah, because he mentioned the paleomagnetic reversals, and I would have jumped on that and said, what are your thoughts on those? Because Answers in Genesis says, yeah, we're perfectly fine with them existing. They occurred during the flood, but Kent Hovind says they don't exist at all. So what is your
Yeah.
position on that? And so I would have been interested. But again, that's most of his opening points had nothing to do with the fossil record.
No,
They were
no,
different geologic events, but
yeah.
not the fossils.
He was going the soft tissue preservation. Things can't possibly be millions of years old, except maybe they are millions of years old, but that's somehow not a problem for a world that thinks it's only 6,000. There's just a muddle on here. So he was completely out of his league. And whether or not he seemed to be aware of the fact that you knew a lot. And so he was aware of that. But you'll notice how he couldn't address any of the you know that because he doesn't know any of that. And he's not getting that because he's never going to get it from Kent Hovind, who is not a detail fiddler. He's a bottom feeder. And there are detail fiddlers, as you and I well know, that are operating at a very, very sophisticated level of source scholarship, even though they have their head up their ass, but they still offer primary sources. Canty isn't at that level. So other than that, I don't know any indication to suggest that Silvius is operating anywhere other than just as somebody orbiting Kent Hovind land.
Yeah, yeah. It was very intriguing because the polonium radio halos were another thing. It does seem like he is just a Hovindista.
Yeah.
Like he's not channeling ICR, AIG, or any of those other groups.
Yeah, because Hovind still plays. Well, they still play Hovind, Robert Gentry at AIG and ICR. You've got a bunch of them that still toss out, even in their current apologetics, polonium halos. And there's sections on polonium halos in the rate books, which I'd love to know if Chris has ever read.
Which, I mean, even by, as Steve said, even by some creationist standards, it doesn't count as good evidence,
No.
Which I think is kind of funny. But,
well,
yeah.
And Gentry is an example, quite correct, that he was published in Science Magazine in that back in the 1960s. And the literature continued to work out. Yeah, polonium halos are occurring primarily because little bits of radon and other stuff can leak out and carry its little radionucleotides with them, and that's what produces the little daughter products farther down the road. It's not a mystery in here, but Gentry doesn't want that. Gentry wants them to be the sign of creation, and even indications. He's even tried to work out where God's throne was at the time of creation. I mean, there's just astonishing arguments. If you ever have the misfortune to read his book that he wrote back, I think, in the 1980s. But from that point on, it's just kind of recycling the bit that, yeah, Gentry published science material. By the way, not always under his own solo. He was often in conjunction with other people, but he was a lead author in there. And pretty soon, he would be classified in the same ballpark as a Snelling, who continues to be published, except Gentry isn't continuing to be published. And then you get farther down into like the James Cole class of they just think they've been published.
Yeah, he's certainly a wackaloon.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting things that we kept coming back to in that discussion was he kept saying the microbes are found in the lowest layers because they live in the earth. What? They're not living deep in the crust. Yeah. The biosphere doesn't go very far down in the crust. They're found in these layers because
the other thing too is that this is reflecting an insular worldview of particularly young Earth creationism, that they want the Genesis account to be the picture of things. The problem is, we know from just the history of science, oh gosh, it wasn't. Which is why when they discovered microbes in the 1700s with the microscopes, they're going, what the hell are these things? Where did they come from? There was no indication in any of their worldview that these things ought to exist. And the Greek scientists were in the same boat because you can't see them with the naked eye. And
Mm-hmm.
so the same thing happens with the geology when they started discovering things that didn't really make sense. All of this comes about in the age of exploration, when physically you're going to places that you see things that don't fit the model of young earth and insular, the world of cows and things that they would know from their farmyards. And it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you have the new scientific discoveries where simultaneously you've got the microscopes discovering stuff they didn't know about, and the telescopes discovering stuff they didn't know about. And then really hits fan in the 20th century, by which time you now have the nasty competing evolutionary paradigm. Well, I don't think Chris knows much about any of that history. You want to bet?
Yeah, I don't think so. When I was talking about the geological record of oxygenation, because he kind of mentioned it in his opening, and then I put it in context in essence by saying, okay, this is not. It wasn't always this way. There wasn't always a what is it 21%
Yeah.
increase in oxygen.
I'm eating spaghetti, by the way. So if you wonder what I'm constantly doing over in the
Oh, I
corner, that's
figured.
it.
Uh, but yeah, there wasn't always a 21% increase in atmospheric oxygenation. This was a gradual thing, and we can see that using
Yeah.
different elements like I think chromium and manganese, where you can test the
Yeah.
oxygen levels, and you have the banded iron
I think
formation.
CO2 levels were higher. I mean, oxygen levels, I think, were higher during the Cretaceous, even during a lot of the dinosaur period. Not a hell of a lot higher, but still higher. And then their big one, of course, was in the Carboniferous. That's where you get the giant bugs.
You're right, yeah, because yeah, they're direct respirers
Yeah.
right through their skin, and so yeah, it's a,
I was rolling on the floor when he was trying to argue about the ecological zonation and all of that, when we know that those arguments have fallen apart in the creationist literature. We know by our direct analysis that we put into the book about Kurt Wise and all these people, they are just falling over each other in a problem trying to make any sense out of these actual deposits. And here poor little Chris is thinking that somehow or other there's a neat, nice thing that can account for why they are the way they are. No, no, no.
right. Yeah, I even mentioned that in the opening where I pointed out you can have multiple ecological layers in the same stratum, which if they're being layered, if they're being layered according to ecology, this shouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make any sense.
And
You know.
we don't have to guess the alternative. Creationists don't have an alternative. We've been hunting, the two of us, to try to find any creationist who can give a paleo ecology of the pre-flood world and the flood environment and the post-flood world in anything like the level of detail that you and I both have read in technical paper after technical paper after technical paper of working out the paleoecology of these past deposits. There is zero alternative in young earth creationism, period.
But RJ, the coal forests
The coal forest, yeah. Oh God, yes. Another one which
that he mentioned,
even
yeah.
other creationists can't buy because the facts don't fit. I mean, the creationists like to sow discord by quoting one evolutionist against another to try to see that there's problems in the evolutionary theory. They have no idea how much discord there is on their own side because people like Chris won't have ever have bumped into that stuff. He'll have just watched the Kent Hovind videos. That's the one area where I was sort of screaming from the secondary commentary section over in my little area is source methods question. Ask him source methods questions.
We did
Find out where he's getting his information from. And other than Kent Hovind and maybe Walt Brown, has he even gotten to Walt Brown? In other words,
yeah.
Did he actually read Walt Brown's posts and books, or is he Walt Brown because he copies stuff from Kent Hovind, who has Walt Brown for him?
Right.
That we don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised, I suppose, if it was just through Kent, vicariously through Kent Hovind.
Yeah. Well, he showed by his lack of detail that he's not up on current creationism. Steve McRae was bringing up baraminology, and I don't think Chris was in any desire to jump in on that to discuss a topic that he isn't studying.
Yeah, we didn't even discuss it. I mentioned the baraminology challenge. Yeah, we didn't discuss it. the thing that really flabbergasted me, he mentioned index fossils during his opening as though they support him, and I, and I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah,
Uh,
because we know I was plugging the book every single time these things was coming out because we go into index fossils. You have the section that you will put in that made sure that we had that in there. Index fossils are not the friend of creationists, and we know by direct inspection that none of them have dealt with index fossils seriously. All they've done is kind of flip them aside and then move on. But yet, theoretically, if all of this damn hydrological sorting and ecological zonation, there would have been organisms living in spots on the earth pre-flood, and then rain comes down, sprinkle, 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 and flood comes in, and fountains of the deep start throwing up, and so you've got bodies of water that are coming in from particular spots, from particular directions, and that they're drowning the animals and swigging things in, and some little animals are going to be swimming up to the top, and you would have plesiosaurs and whales and seals and a whole bunch of aquatic creatures gulping for air up on the surface as the flood waters get higher and higher. Little birds and pterosaurs and microraptors and all these other things running amok, trying to find little places as they're scampering up the mountainsides, of which there may or may not have been mountains, which mountains existed, were there the Himalayas, were there the Appalachians, were there Mount Ararat. All of the stuff that they would need to think through if they ever got to a model. And you and I know nobody has tried to think that through. None.
Yeah.
Not Snelling, not Tompkins, not Clary, not Carter, not Wise. They have cartoons once in a while, and that's as much as they can do. They got that chart, and you know that when we were writing the book, every time I encountered another example of it, I was going, oh, they mentioned the sea level chart again, the sea level chart again, the sea level chart again. And I was literally stumping material in right up to the publication of the book because they kept on repeating this stupid chart that they came up with on the sea levels that's totally imaginary, and that they wanted to do to fit their modeling because they can't deal with the actual sea level variation that we can spot from the fossil record. But even the one they came up with as a fiction, they've got fluctuations that they don't even try to account for. It's terrible.
Indeed. From the live chat, hello everyone. Hello TD and Sean and Vesta and Vodka Vision, and
Hi, gang.
and everybody. Jerry Penna. So Vesta left this comment that says it was a tad like Dapper Dinosaur's debate with Kent on whether birds are dinosaurs. When Kent was asked what characters make a dino, and Dr. Dino didn't know.
Yeah, that's exactly that. And that's why Source Methods is the killer app, because it's not a matter merely of pointing out that they have their head up their ass on all this actual science data. It's that they can't field a scholarly method that's viable from their side, that they don't fact check their material. They don't work out what their model is. They don't try to accommodate the data. If their model was true, they would be scavenging every scrap of information. They would be delighted to have topics brought up because they have their powerful model that can predict exactly what's going on. And they would be able to say, look at the oil companies that use flood geology, and look at all of the ones that use the rate book as their gospel, and they make money at it, and there's a positive track record of success. But they can't do that because they don't have that track record of success.
I don't know if
they aren't on the field. Yeah, the Zion matter. If everybody who's got our book, you can look up the Zion Oil Company section.
Well,
it's
did
quite
you
a
see
ways
what
down.
the person posted about it right at the end? That their stocks closed out at 18 cents today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're still on the field. They're not actually doing anything because, of course, they can't. What was involved, however, is an awful lot of stock manipulation, because Hal Lindsey, as we pointed out in the book, had actually done a thing where he was touting this oil company thing as a way of biblical bid, and he was making kickback money off of this kind of thing. It was a very shady operation. Why should we expect anything more reputable from a Christian end timer on this point?
Yeah,
by their fruits ye shall know them.
Yeah, the whole bit about the coccolithophores and making limestone and chalk was all very telling, talking about the trends in particular organisms as seen in the fossil record. And that was all very interesting. It just kind of makes is not explicable under
Now,
creationism.
when I started looking into young Earth creationism, and it was a hot thing in the 1980s, this is going to date me as old fart, that this was when they were trying to get the equal time things in to be taught creation science and evolution equally in the schools, and it hit the Supreme Court, and that was the end of that. But the thing is that as I started diving into all of this, I was now primed to try to see where's their model, not how often they can snark at evolution being inexplicable, or that they can't explain this and they can't explain where the origin of life came up and all of that, but where's their model? That I could envisage a flood model that you can think through what would be happening with all of this stuff going on. You would realize that any particular slice of land has got to be bearing witness to all the events that arose to produce it. And if you can't come up with a model like that, my favorite example, and I mentioned it in the live chat on the debate, that I loved, is the fact that there were deposits that have rock formations with crystals in them that require a certain baking temperature, and they're in the same layering. You have to have the flood laying down rocks that are underground that are being baked at completely different temperatures and pressures all at the same time in the flood. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, yeah. The water, the whirlpool forming both the White Cliffs of Dover on the one hand, but also forming other types of formations. It just does not make any sense.
We need Sean here to say they're making shit up.
Yeah, that no part of that makes any sense.
Yeah, because I don't think either you or I have bumped into that model
I have
anywhere at ICR or AIG. So I think that's a Kent Hovinista thing, that he was just putting on his cute little thinking cap, the one with the little bells dangling, and
he certainly tried, didn't he?
yeah, and it's sad about it because here we're in the 21st century, bloody hell. We have access to all of those technical papers, that there is nothing that prevents that kid from downloading any of that stuff and reading it. And he is thinking that a tour guide from Kent Hovind is an avenue to knowledge. Boy, what a waste of time.
Yeah, a tour guide for what? You want? I mean, did Kent go over?
And... Oh, I think it's to his little theme park down there.
Oh, well, that's terrible.
Remember, he's got his little theme land where apparently you have a chance of drowning if you're a little kid.
Yeah, I saw that. Oh my God! But you know what his response was? The kid's siblings had fun.
Oh, that's good.
That man is an absolute monster. And
there was a very revealing. And if Dapper Dino is in the discussion in the live chat in there, I give him.
He's
kudos.
Not right now.
Dapper had done a interview with an ex young Earth creationist who bumped in to the world of Ken Ham, and how he was an employee at I think the Creation Museum rather than the Art Park, and how diffident and peremptory and unthinking and unfeeling and unsympathetic Ken Ham is as a person. And so I'm going, yipes, wow. I mean, if you're going to be a scientific ignoramus, can't you at least be a nice, cuddly one?
I can't say I'm surprised by that. The Answers crew, whenever he talks, they always kind of seem to hold their breath and, hope they don't
waiting, it's like the people standing behind Donald Trump at the press conference,
Yeah, it is. You can just see Georgia Purdom and Bodie Hodge kind of going like, okay.
What is he going to say?
Just kind of having to take it.
But although I don't think I've ever seen any of the Ken Hamistas ever pointedly contradict or correct the emperor in front of it, which is at least different than what we get with Fauci and some of these others, where they'll have to say, well, no, that's actually not good advice. Yeah. So we're seeing the methods of things. Everybody can watch the difference between you and Chris and for that matter, Steve, who was a perfectly fine moderator. I mean, he obviously no friend of creationism, but he was an entirely fair moderator in
Yeah,
this and handled it
absolutely.
quite nicely. Give thumbs up to Steve for a thing. Get back in the fray.
Did
There's so much stupid to go after and discuss.
did
This
you
is important.
did you hear that uh, someone in the live chat suggested that we have a discussion with not a live like a formal debate, but a discussion with Raw Matt and Standing. Would you
Yeah.
be down for that? Because
Oh yeah.
I don't think I've talked to. I don't think I've had a discussion
Yeah,
with
I don't think
Standing
I've had
since
any
our
direct
debate.
interaction with Matt as a face to face or voice to voice,
Yeah, I
so
don't think
that
I
would
have
be kind
either.
of fun in there. But well, I'll be saying, "Oh, I have a source methods question." I have, matter of fact, a whole bunch of source methods questions. I'd like to see what's going on here, and let's try to grapple with things and just have a discussion on the matter. It should be with a fair moderator who will say, wait a minute, we're digressing here, or wait a minute, you're kind of hogging the road, and anybody can jump in and say, shut up, RJ, you've been going on too long. I have no problems with that. But nevertheless, you don't want to have just kind of a free for all, because we know that then it's the loudest voice that fits in on it.
Right.
And then the other issue should be the extent to which, if we are bringing up technical points, for heaven's sakes, we should be putting up the references to them. So
Sure. Yeah.
we can bring up our technical literature, and for that matter, the creationists should be bringing in their source. And if they are relying on a secondary creationist source for their air quotes information, not just give us the technical paper that they culled from it, but the creationist source they copied it from. That's fair. In the same
Yeah.
way, I don't have to worry about giving the Science Daily link to the technical paper I'm dealing with. I'm going to the technical paper directly, damn it. I'm bypassing that stage. I don't need that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just so much easier just to go to the paper. Like when I read the technical paper on the Solnofan limestone during our discussion, and his reaction was, "I'd love to read that to see where a whirlpool could fit in. It don't. It don't
It
fit
don't.
in."
In fact, that Solnhofen is a positively archetypal Plattenkalk. That was the first one where they really started using that word, was to describe this. Oh, even
Dang
a teeny
Germans.
little ripple here is going to be a problem. This has got to be the most boring, calm, serene, bland formation deposit you could possibly imagine. And because it was so anoxic, that's why we get things with feather impressions and all that other stuff in here. So this is one that even you could just imagine that if you just think of that tidal wave of the Fountain of the Deeps coming in, you're going to kiss the Solnhofen goodbye. You are going to be kissing Mesel goodbye. All of these places that cannot possibly be formed. You're just going to have all that stuff washing it away in a thunderous mass.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this, I'm excited to talk to Standing and Matt, and I'm sure Steve will hammer out a topic or whatever, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because we can chat
Which
about
they
whatever.
will try to evade. For God's sakes, let it not be zygotic heterozygotic, created heterozygosity.
Yeah.
Because that's part of his happy-go-lucky thing. What Steve should actually try to do is pick a topic that is as specific as possible, that is a interesting area where our contrasting worldviews and approaches to data and data field would actually bear, that it's the sort of question that a scientific view is going to be able to give an answer to it and grapple with it, and the creationists are going to be up shit creek because they won't know how to apply their useless models to it.
I would love to see something like maybe something baraminological, because we can both
Yeah.
talk about baraminology, and theoretically they should be able to. And so,
I would naturally nominate the therapsids. That
oh yeah,
how
sure.
many, where and how many therapsids were there? How many were created? If you're looking at the original ones created in and where did they live? Where all only in Eden, and then they biogeographically spread out, making a beeline for the Karoo in one particular context, and the Ishugalasto. And how exactly did they get there? And what exactly was that paleogeological arrangement? And then how did it get to be the way it is? And how did it get to be rock so fast? That's so buried in that whole bit. of the systematics. And then, of course, we have lurking in the background our little double job Cro-Magnon-Nathians. Isn't it nice? God loves this evolutionists so much to make stuff.
Yeah, I think something along those lines where we could have where maybe not necessarily lineage in particular, but can you demonstrate any organism to be part of a Barrowman? And
Yeah.
how would you separate this
And
organism?
how do you draw the line as to how much variation? How much variation can a Barrowman have? How many chucks can a woodchuck chuck? How many Barrowmans? What's the boundary layer for these things? Because we know from looking at the actual Barrowmanology literature and have standing for truth and Matt ever bothered with much of that, that invariably they're bumping up against the boundary layers of the systematics, and you have to see them suddenly start taking a little lantern of ANOPA or whatever the little techniques that they use for a lot of these things, and then they take the little lantern and go and blow out the candle to make sure, oh, we don't want to look at that, and we don't want to look at that, and let's take that genetic data and flush that over there, and let's not deal with that. We don't want to look at that fossil because it's incomplete. And so they're deliberately slowing down their analysis at the moment they get into the point where we're going, ooh, you're in trouble because that Barrowman's going to be leaky, and that one's going to leak into that one, and that one's going to leak into that one, and pretty soon you've got a Therapsid Barrowman. Do you want Therapsids as a mono Barrowman? Really? Let's go there.
Yeah, it would be that would be a fun discussion because I really doubt that they've done any reading on vertebrate natural history.
How can they possibly draw the line? And the very fact that only M. Aaron even tried to tiptoe into the area, and he had to pick an outlier group, the Cassiids, at which point it'd be fun to know, as we will be discussing these things, to what extent will either Matt or Tippy Typer standing for truth be racing for his Google searches to try to find a creationist source to discuss these things for him, and discovering that there isn't any. He can't find anything at AIG. He can't find anything at Create CMI. He can't find anything at ICR. He can't find anything on those because they don't think about them.
Yeah. Same with index fossils. There are none. No articles.
So they would have to put their thinking cap on and think on their own. They would have to work out what the boundary layers of Barrowmans are, and they aren't going to be able to troll Jensen or Tompkins or Kurt Wise or anybody else on this point. And let's see them apply their model. But they don't have a model. You can't apply a model you don't have.
Yeah, that would certainly be fun. I hope that
so if you're listening, Steve, at any point, yes, how many Therapsid Barrowmans are there, and what was the paleo world the Barrowmans lived in from Eden down to the Ark, and then what happened to them after the Ark landed, and where was that? So what's the record of the Therapsids after that? The fact of the matter is even by the Ark encounter, all of them went extinct.
Yeah.
So apparently they just had really bad luck. God wanted to preserve everything and then make sure that 50% plus of the things on the Ark go extinct.
Right, yeah, the moment they step off, dead.
Just, bye, little kids. We're never going to see you again. Bye, Dimetrodon.
the non-mammalian synapsids, as they
can't you just see the Noah and the kids wandering around in with their moon pool and all the other wonderful things of the Ark encounter, and then going to pet the cute cuddly little Dimetrodons and Gorgonopsids, and
yeah, that would certainly be something.
Let's give them a little bit of lettuce. Oh, you just chopped my arm off there, you little blasted. Don't you know that you're a herbivore?
Let's see. Ray Rod says you should watch the Standing for Truth and Raw Matt Kind videos before this debate and shred up how they're unable to interpret a phylogeny.
Oh, yeah. Shoot me the information on that on Twitter and all that.
I think I remember one of them said like a raccoon was in like a different clade or something like that, and it was a bunch of people laughing about it. I don't remember the whole thing. I'm sure
Yeah,
Rhaegar
but
does,
yeah,
but
that's a very good point. Yes, we'll want to have a good sense of applied matology and applied ology when
mythology.
it comes.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to watch.
Has anyone ever seen SFT other than the SpongeBob logo and now his Superman avatar?
I don't think so. I think he's and it's fine. It's fine to have an avatar. It's some people like to retain their anonymity. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Still, I you and I don't give a rat's ass. We show
They
ourselves.
have one on dogs, goats, and oxen. Ooh, that would be fun because
Oh,
oxen and
Bovide.
goats are the same family. So
Ooh, who discussed something on that in a recently published book? It's somewhere out
hmm.
there. It'll occur to me.
I wonder if it's our book.
Oh gosh, that's absolutely correct. We have a whole big section on that and how every single creationist who has shut their mouth off on this are clearly not paying attention to most of the data. Well, we are sure dear old Matt and SFT can do much better than that, which isn't difficult because they did zero.
The good
And so if
old
they go to like
cognitum.
0.0, is that better than the
Hey, it's an extra significant figure.
yeah,
They just have
yeah.
to use the cognitum, RJ. Just
Oh,
use the
yes,
cognitum.
cognitive. Oh, yes, let's see what cognitive tax accounting does. I think that's what Kent Hovind used.
I think his is no cognitum. Out
Yes,
of
there
sight,
we
out of
go.
mind.
We're being snotty on here, but heck, Mandy, what can we do?
Oh, we got a
It,
creationist over here.
oh,
Ruh-roh.
who?
John Wick. Erica was defeated. No, sorry.
No.
If you remember, Rob Matt's the guy who posted a picture of Psittacosaurus and said it was a parrot.
Yeah,
So no.
yeah, yeah. That's people. If they, you know, I expect anybody that presents an argument to be better than that. I mean, if you want to go ahead, make your argument, you get some things where you get people. Michael Denton has a level of seriousness to him and a
Sure.
level of technical proficiency that at least is formidable, and indeed it's fun to deal with. But when you've got the bottom feeder copyists and sad people that don't even realize how much of the data field they don't know anything about because they never bother to look. I go, no, 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 no. There's better than that. You have no excuse for that. Make your argument if you can. Find a dandy. Do your monograph. That's the problem I have with that stupid C Brown. Who he can never appear on my channel comments because he refuses to contact the radiometric people guy and explain why he knows their field better than they do and give us the answer. And I told him I wouldn't accept any comments until he did that. Well, of course he hasn't done that. So he's now jumping in on the old Maddox debate that I had and putting comments in there, and he's just repeating the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again. And I keep on saying, listen, why are you trying to persuade me? You don't need to persuade me. You need to persuade the scientists. Take your brilliance to them. Explain to them why they're wrong. Why did you worry with little old me? I'm just old RJ. I have just a BA in history. I'm inconsequential. Why are you going? Because that's all he can do.
Yeah.
He's going to make the comments and make the comments and make the comments, and you dance around and around and around and around and around and around and around. I'm not trying to overturn the sciences, but I am trying to contend that creationism is claptrap, and I'm not shy about coming in contact with them too. I love the fact that who was it saying that I'm afraid to debate somebody. When have I been reluctant to debate anybody, or have ever refused to do a debate?
Yeah, I haven't. I haven't said. I don't think I've said no to anyone. I really don't see any point, for instance, in debating Nephilim free. So if I guess if someone says, "Hey, would you debate him?" Why? Why?
Yeah, and I've had the same issues with him. Although in the right context and with the right topic, you can still get a lot of interesting science information in. I wouldn't be in an after show with him because he's like a buzzsaw of
Yeah.
presuppositional blather. That's the only time I ever lost my temper around a creationist was bumping into Nephilim. He just drives me up the wall. But then again, he drives everybody up the wall. So this is not. I can't feel special in that regard.
Oh, John Wick says, "Why did she have no answer to orphan genes?" Well, guess what? We
Somebody,
do.
as I recall, had a big extensive section on orphan genes in their recent book.
Oh,
Who might that be?
could that have been us?
Oh, there. Yes,
Oh
I
my
remember.
goodness, that was
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Jackson, have you debated RJ yet? On what topic? Uh,
I think if we ever find anything we disagree on,
do you like pineapples on pizza?
I don't.
Okay, well, no, we agree on that. I'm
Okay.
a Star Wars person. You're more of a Star Trek person, if I remember correctly.
Sort of. Well, I like both of them. And I'm also a
Okay.
Doctor Whovian, so I mean, I cover all the bases.
Okay, well, I've never actually watched Doctor Who. Um,
It'll be an acquired taste. Although I will tell you that unless you are open to watching things with unbelievably cheesy special effects and kind of like, oh, I've seen this plot 15 times, be wary of looking at the older Doctor Who. But if you need to dive into Doctor Who, pick it up at the Capaldi level, the more recent 2 or 3 Doctors, because those are top flight. The special effects are brilliant. The writing is crisp and ingenious. They're philosophical and entertaining, and they're like, they would easily pass muster as a full blown high quality movie of 1970 or 1980, when you would go over and look at Doctor Who, where they bump into the set and the thing wobbles and the stars are wobbling outside. I mean, it was like $8 budget.
let's see. TD Lane says, which dinosaur is the best dinosaur? What are your thoughts on
Oh,
that,
I don't
RJ?
have favorites like that, but there's a bunch that I find intriguing.
I like
Um,
Parasaurolophus.
all of those hadrosaurs are intriguing. They're the extent to which they had social communication with their nasal passages. Parasaurolophus, of course, is the flame-throwing dinosaur, according to
Yes.
Dwayne Gish.
Can we just stop agreeing on things, RJ? I mean, oh my goodness.
But I'm also intrigued by a lot of the little also ran things. The whole development of scoots, which are the little bony knobby things on a lot of dinosaurs, and the fact that it shows up in so many different contexts. You've got some of the dwarf titanosaurids in that in South America have
Oh,
spikes
oh
and
yeah.
scoots, which is really interesting, but they're not showing up in very commonly in the earlier groups. They're just in these little oddball ones. So what
Um,
little genetic basement is lurking around in there that suddenly gets selection pressure going that wasn't applying to plateosaurids and all of that? So you can see we're dinosaur geeking out here,
there,
kids.
I think of all the sauropods, Shunnosaurus from the early Jurassic of China is very interesting because it has a tail with spikes on it at the very end, kind of like a stegosaurid, like a
Yeah.
thagomizer, and it's like,
And they're not by any of the systematics, they're not close cousins.
no, yeah, exactly. It's like it's so bizarre. You got this little sauropod just out here, a basal
Yeah.
sauropod, and he's got spikes on his tail. It's like, what the heck? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so buried in there, we can't tell a lot from looking at bird genomes because they don't manifest these kinds of features. So
Oh,
it's a paleogenomic issue that just screams interesting, interesting. And then, oh, and the other big thing, I've mentioned this in previous shows and that as well, is the plasticity of the dinosaurs when it comes to like number of neck vertebrae and a lot of and tail vertebrae, that they have a plasticity that mammals are boring as dishwater when
oh
it
yeah.
comes to that. We're stuck in our relatively fixed mode, in part because we're quadrupedal. And so there's a dynamic of selection pressure against changing rib numbers and stuff. There was some technical papers. I think I put that in the slam dunk at one point. But the sauropods in that, and you look at some of the reptile cousins, Tentriniforsaurus or something. It's that one little weird aquatic creature that's got this unbelievably long snake neck. I think it's from
Oh,
the Triassic.
Tenistropheus, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
You're so much better with those
well,
damn words, you geek.
there's Tenistropheus, and there's like one other one from that group which has an insanely long neck. Another
Yeah.
one of those weird Triassic
I would
aquatic guys.
anticipate they're probably those features
I
are probably derived from single amino acid repetitions in a particular gene that would be the equivalent of HOX13 or one of those homeobox
I
genes.
think
But since we
it's
don't have them to look at in their genome, we can't do that. We have to kind of
is
speculate
it
and infer.
Dinocephalosaurus, I think is the name of it. Dinocephalus. Let me see if I'm crazy or if I'm nope, I'm right. It is Dinocephalosaurus. Yeah, another one of those Tenistrophiids with the insanely long
Yeah.
necks.
Yeah,
Yes.
bit by bit they do that. But every one of these things, every organism that ever existed not only had parents, get that, Kent, but it also had a DNA. And there will have been the products of all of its cis-regulatory things and the presence of or absence of genes and the pacing of things in pleiotropic interconnections and blah, blah, blah. All of that, in principle, was necessary to produce the morphology that we see preserved in the fossil record. And the only people who are even trying to think through all of that are the regular evolutionary scientists. And I think you and I both can agree, we have never seen a creationist think about these problems.
No, you're right. TD brought up a point here. He said, but we all know Longus Quama is the actual ancestor of birds. Hey, Ellen Fiducia, get
Oh,
out of
you're
here.
going to go fiducia on me. Yeah, you'll notice that he doesn't discuss those lately. He was still trying to field that argument in the early 2000s, and it was starting to look pretty thin. And by the time then we get down to the current period, he just kind of just has left that aside because there has been no support in the paleontological record. The fact that we keep on getting dry wells, that
1 sec.
Alan Fiducia searching for a Triassic a bird ancestor is as fruitless as Zion Oil Company striking oil in Israel. I'll give you that. I'll cover while Jackson's off getting his thing because I'll have to go and leave the camera a bit. I was just saying that Alan Fiducia finding a Triassic ancestor for birds is about as plausible as Zion Oil Company striking a gusher in Israel.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's the funny thing. The thing I love about Fiducia is that creationists are so happy. They're just giddy to cite him as. Doesn't matter how much paleobabble there is, Archaeopteryx is just a perching bird. None of them, not a single freaking one of them, will go a step further and actually look up what he thinks. Because he also
Yeah.
says, oh yeah, Deinonychus is a bird, Velociraptor is a bird, anything with feathers is a bird,
All those Silurisaurs are birds, yeah.
which now includes actual ornithischians, like Tianulong and
Yeah.
Psittacosaurus. It's like, what? So,
Yeah, and this was just a natural feature on his part because in his own way, he's as obtuse as Colin Patterson is. That in order to get from a non-feathered organism to a feathered organism, it's got to do something. And it's revealing that he's really not engaged on Prum and Brush's work in this area, or for that matter, Alibardi, works that we cite in the books, both A Slam Dunk and Rocks were there. They're wonderful technical papers, and virtually all of them are open access one place or another, so everybody can follow up on them. You'll be if we can ever do illustrated editions of some of these things, and if Slam or Rocks were there keeps going, it's still hanging in there. I think number 16 on the new philosophy science books there at Amazon. There we've been holding our own little bit by little bit. I'm amazed we're that high. It must show you how few people buy books other than ours. That we're showing up on page one of the of the good number sellers. We were up to number 8 there for a while, which really shocked the pajamas out of me.
Yeah.
7 or 8.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That produced a big burst. We'll see how other burps come along, and everybody in your social networks, let people know it. If you've got the books and you like them, tell people about them and say, boy, have you read the Rocks Were There? Oh, you haven't? Well, you got to get the Rocks Were There, and tell them why that it's important. Neither one of us have to be shy about it, but banging our own drums, we can do it and do it. But the fact of the matter is, it's through everybody else banging the drums and letting everybody else know about it. We're both proud of the work that we came up with something where, wow, we actually did siphon together a hell of a lot of material for this bloody thing. And we'll be doing again in volume 2. There's a hell of a lot of extra stuff to bring in with all of the remaining chapters on there. And we'll have a fun time writing on that too.
Oh yeah, there's still a lot left. We're not done.
More stupid Menton.
Oh yeah, so much Minton. I almost cried when I saw that I had to read like 2 of his chapters in a row.
Oh boy.
It's just so
and
boring.
we're in such a good case. If there's another area, Tiktaalik and the origin of tetrapods is a thing where biogeography is just making sense of why we're seeing the animals distributed and forming in the way we do in the ecological dynamics of how these critters that got little feet that are purely aquatic. Eventually, because they also have the capacity to gulp air now and then, because of their proto lung systems and things, are gradually moving into these new environments. And because it's like all on their own, plus the little bugs and plants are there. Ooh, munchie time.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked to Chris about predictions, and TikTok was one of them, and he was just kind of like, huh, yeah,
Yeah, well, you know,
okay.
and that lack of curiosity. And another thing too that I hope kind of shows is how unenthusiastic creationists often are about the wonders of God's creation compared to our level of enthusiasm about the evolved reality of life. We're constantly amazed and fascinated and delighted by all the wonderment that we see, and then you get these creationists going over there where they're just talking about all the problems that evolution has on this, and God's creation is really so wonderful. And please don't ask me too much about what viruses we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. When we were talking about the horizontal gene transfer, we brought up the rotoplex hypothesis, and how there are uh, protists consuming other protists or becoming symbionts, and uh, you can see this in like well, like diatoms and these other chromists, where they've got like levels of endosymbionts in them,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Second, third, tertiary symbiosis, where an already endosymbiotic component gets glommed onto and becomes a subsystem in thing, or an already existing endosymbiotic system latches onto a new component that brings it in. So it's been, frankly, from James Valentine's era, from 2004 down to today, it can be argued that the trend of the science has been recognizing just how intricate and complex the little twists and turns can be as to things munching things and getting bad indigestion, where they end up having subcomponents as organelles.
yeah, yeah. It was it's all very fascinating, and yet you never hear creationists talk about like protists or prokaryotes if it's not humans or dogs or
Dogs and
goats.
cats and bears and stuff,
And
because they
goats,
can
yeah.
bring up whales didn't come from bears, and then of course the horse thing. That's another measure of why knowing the track record of the creationist is so important, because you can measure quite clearly, just as you were doing functionally with Chris today, by what items he brings up and what sources he brings up. So the fact that he's waving polystrate fossils is telling you about his source base. The fact that he's waving gentry and then Kent Hovind, that's telling you about his source base. And so anybody that brings up I love horses as an example of that, because you can precisely locate them on their landscape of secondary copying by how they deal with horses. Because you have Ken Ham to this day still prattling on that horses can't possibly have evolved, and yet his own Ark encounter has Dinohippus as the horse barrowman on board the Ark.
Yeah, and then you have Kurt Wise and Todd Wood and David Kavanaugh saying, "Hey, actually, Hyracotherium is the first horse."
Yeah, yeah, and the fact that they put a short-necked giraffe aboard the Ark, when
Yeah.
generations of creationists have insisted it's physically impossible to get a long-necked giraffe from a short-necked ancestor. And so what did they put on the Ark as the giraffe form? A short-necked form? Don't they compare notes? And the answer is no.
No, yeah. Every generation, every new organization of creationists reinvents the wheel.
They're
Uh,
just like tarot cards, where occult tarot, which is a card game, and I put it in my novel, as they play some Tarak on board the ship on the Carnatic. But it's been hijacked by occultists. But since the 18th century on, but since there is no occult tarot, they invent it, and new occultists then come along and reinvent that. So you get these series of completely incompatible occult systems, depending upon whether it's a Tia or the Order of the Golden Dawn or New Age people trying to connect it up to the Maya or whatever. And it's just hilarious, the messes that they get into, which is exactly the same methodological problem you get into when you have creationists trying to figure out how many therapsid barometers there are.
you
Isn't
know,
that?
RJ, I can't. I keep thinking about about your orange aura The I
Oh yes, the orange aura.
I just
Yes,
can't
funny.
stop thinking about that because that was
Yeah, for
so
those who don't
funny.
understand the illusion, I went into an occult bookstore. This must have been maybe the 1980s or so, and I love challenging tarot card readers. Do they know anything about the history of the tarot? And so I wanted to know where it came from. And they immediately said, "Oh, it's probably from Atlantis and the ancient Egyptians and all that." And of course, I just, isn't that silly? And so I would actually point out a specific card that I knew about the history of how it figured in Italian tarots and why the images were chosen the way they were. And I was asking about it. And after they were saying, well, I don't really know where that came from. And then I start explaining what the hangman refers to. And it's an in joke with the Sforza family and refers to the 12 treasons that Matteo Sforza made against the Pope and all that kind of stuff. And at that point, they decide maybe I'm not on their side.
Uh-oh.
And suddenly, the other little lady in the room, she decided that I now had this terrible orange aura of skepticism around me. Funny, it wasn't lit when I walked into their little hall, that they didn't notice it glowing earlier. They only spot it when I started criticizing it.
When you started ripping them a new one, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I just I've been thinking about that constantly because I just think RJ goes into a store to disturb the peace.
Oh yeah, well sometimes I would be looking for tarot decks because I collect them.
Mhm.
And there was one little store. I had a practical gold mine that proves rather useful because it was formerly an occult bookstore that was changing to a normal science-oriented bookstore. So they had this big backlog of occult tarots, and they had them on a big wheelie thing. And there was no great stampede to buy the things, so they were leaving them at pretty good markdown prices and so forth, just so they could get rid of the damn things. And I would come in periodically after I had my paycheck from work and that, and pick up. I would triage what order I wanted to get them in because a lot of them were really obscure European tarots that reflected one of those invented out of thin air tarots that's separate from the ones we use now.
Mhm.
And because all of those, virtually all the tarot decks, if you go into Barnes and Noble and go to their occult tarot section in the store, you will find a bunch of tarot decks that are virtually all at ground copies of Arthur Edward Waite's Rider deck from 1910. So that design that they're using in various iterations, they may make them up as medieval figures or Atlanteans or fairy folk. There'll be a lot of different subject matter, but you'll look and see when you look at the minor arcana, as it's called, and if you see if they've got pictures of people doing stuff with the 10 swords and all that, that's copying Waite. So that means their tarot design is younger than driving automobiles, flying airplanes, and making long distance telephone calls.
Yeah, I think that's funny. You should do a
Yeah.
whole show, RJ, or like write a book on tarot cards.
Oh well, I actually have I have a massive material that I have as one of my many projects knocking around in there on the history of the occult tarot as well as regular tarot cards and all that. And there's been a variety of people that have done various history books and stuff on it. It's a fascinating area because it's everybody knows about playing cards and few people understand the actual history of the bloody little things, why certain cards look the way they do and all of that. The same thing applies to the tarot. When they find out that there's like a card game of them and they're played to this day in Italy and France and other places where they are playing cards with them, no cult connotation to them, and they might be absolutely shocked to learn that such a thing is happening on there. So anyway, and a cheap plug for Paralogs of Phileas Fogg, that if you want to kind of get a little introduction to the Tarot deck, buy that book and then go down to where Passepartout is playing with the two Austrian gentlemen on board the Carnatic. And by the way, also throwing people overboard and mayhem is ensuing and various things are happening on board that ship in this little adventure story that I have created.
Yeah.
I'm most of the way through the second novel. I was just finishing up chapter 26 of the new book, and I've still got some tinkerings to deal with in my sketch material and that. But yeah, now that I've finished out for the moment the Rocks writing, to where I'm on hiatus for a month or so until we get back into that with a vengeance, I'm continuing on with the second Paralogs novel. So if you're sitting there spinning your wheels in social distancing and like Jules Verne, science fiction, mysteries, historical adventures, any of that stuff, get the Paralogs of Phileas Fogg. You can get it on Amazon while you're buying the other books, and make a nice little thing of it, and that'll give you plenty of read to get you through the horrible times that we're having, where everybody has to be at home with each other.
Right, yeah, just the absolute worst. Yeah.
How's things going on there at the college? For
Well, actually, classes resume this upcoming week.
real in class
Oh,
classes
no, no,
or
no.
just
Online
online?
classes.
Yeah,
Online.
yeah. I was wondering about that. Yeah, everything
Yeah,
kind of ground to a halt here.
I'll have like a history test and a, a computer science project as soon as
Oh,
basically as soon as we come back.
what history are you covering in that? By the way, that's curious.
American history to 1877.
Oh, okay. Well, you're knee deep in early Reconstruction and the Civil War and antebellum and all that kind of stuff. That the era of when Republicans were virtuous and true.
Yeah,
Abraham Lincoln.
we right before coronavirus suspended everything, we had just ended the Revolutionary War. We
Mm.
just fought in the Revolutionary War and won for the
Oh, and
Americans.
cheap plug for the next Paralogs book, because I have an extensive section in that when Phileas Fogg and company visit the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876. It plays a pivotal role in the story. You get to ride the monorail that was there and see all the different restaurants, and Aouda eats popcorn for the first time. And oh yes, there's the atomic powered rocket plane that's parked on the ship on the place downtown, but
Yeah, it's yeah, when we I've been right now. I guess I've really been writing scripts for YouTube videos because we did the. I put out the
yeah.
one on the last one. Thank God on LSS
Bye
for a
bye to
while.
somebody that was had more attention paid to him than he deserved.
Oh yeah, I. Oh my goodness, we should have only done like the one on the Discovery Institute when he published there instead
Yeah,
of.
because that's as much as you're going to get from him.
He just is just wrong,
Oh, tell the
compounding
audience who we're
wrong.
referring to, by the way,
Oh,
just in case they don't know.
if you haven't been watching it, I've been doing a series on, or we've been doing a series on this guy named Long Story Short, who it's really hard to find his channel. Like, I've been having to find it by going to my videos and clicking the link and then going to his
Mm.
channel, because if you type in Long Story Short, you won't get it. And oddly enough, the Discovery Institute didn't link his channel when they posted his
I
video.
can hardly wonder why.
Oh,
Oh, and by the way, I'm not going to take any credit for that. Don't use a we on that. This is your wonderful work in that. I mean, I do vet your scripts and stuff in that. I make a little comment here and there,
well,
add a
I
little
think
tiny little blip, but the heavy lifting is you, kid.
Well, I think you and Ration and Nestleg we all contribute to this stuff together, and I wouldn't have the breadth or the scope of this material without you guys. So I thank you. I thank you all.
We all pull together on things. I can attest to the fact that it's hardly ever that I find one of your scripts doesn't have those damn technical listings at the end where I go through and I go, oh shit, I didn't have that. Ooh, I got to add that. Ooh, that's interesting. So it's always been a learning experience for me. It's quite literally that you keep up with an awful lot of material and find stuff even down and then on the historical end of stuff. I love that stuff that you've been coming up with lately about the number of people, Prothero and others, who and Valentine, that were knee deep in applying plate tectonics to paleogeography so early.
Yeah, I was actually that blew my mind. That first of all, I didn't know Valentine is ancient. And
Yeah,
so
I was actually surprised. I was thinking that he was much more recent. But to realize, I knew vaguely that he'd been published back in the 1970s, but I kind of didn't do the math because so much of his stuff is in the last 20, 30 years. And yeah, but
yeah, no, he's what did we say, 96?
90 something, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
he
and Ernst Mayr lived a ridiculously long life. And for that matter, Richard Lewontin, I think, is getting into Bernie Sanders territory. He's quite old.
well, the crazy thing is because I read on the Origin of Phyla, he wrote that, or he published, I should say, when he was 89 years old.
Yeah.
89. I mean, oh my goodness.
Not all that many scientists maintain an active publication activity that old. And that's telling you how sharp of a mind he
Wait,
is
hold
and how
on.
formidable he is.
Hold on, wait. Something's not adding up. No, he published that in 2004. He's 96 currently. What was that? That was how many years ago? 16. So was he 80? So I guess he was 80. Whatever it was. Anyways, he's ancient. he's ancient and he's still publishing very big books about
Yeah.
modern material. And so even still, that's astounding. I hope to be like that one day.
Well, he's one of those, and E.O. Wilson
Oh
falls into
yeah,
that
E.O. Wilson's
category. You know,
ancient.
people who are. I think the science keeps them young. The curiosity keeps them young.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins is no spring chicken either. I think he's almost 80.
That
He,
you can be, especially when you operate in the imagination and the science realm. It's not something where you have to lift heavy weights and stuff. You know, obviously, active paleontologists are tough noogies on that. But if you're looking at it from where you're making sense out of the paleontology, you can do that from your desk.
right, yeah, I didn't realize that, and it just so happened when I was looking up some information on Prothero actually for the discussion opening, that he was one of the part of the first group of people using paleomagnetism to describe continental strata. That's pretty cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, the moment I can get into their head. By a C Brown, I'm just responding to another one of his little dithering. Show me how many vaccines were created from assuming and pursuing a common ancestor for all life. How many wasted dollars have been used looking for the fruitless endeavor on how life arose from. That's the same old shtick. Oh my! Here we go. Science do not need your stupid ass religion! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Your stupid ass religion is holding science back. Oh, that's the easiest part. Yeah, it's holding science so far back that all the people actually doing the work are evolutionists. That's how far it's holding back the science.
Yikes. Yeah.
That's what I will say.
Well, yeah. So had an interesting discussion tonight. I'll try to link that in the description once it uploads on Steve's channel, and then you all can watch it and bring vodka, I guess. Oh yeah, the long story short thing. I was kind of surprised that the Discovery Institute didn't link his channel. I think they should have. It's kind of weird that they didn't, because he literally did the entire video and they just put up his video, which gave him basically no channel traffic, right? You know, if you're trying to help someone in your community, are you just going to take their work and give them no traffic? I mean, come on, you know, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
I may not agree with him, but at least he deserves, you know, the recognition among his own people for his work, you know. And so, but yeah, we're done with him for now. There's no point in continuing that discussion with him. We've got a very funny script coming up next. I'm very excited for it. And then after that, we're going to be doing one. We're going to be talking about that new bilaterian fossil.
Oh, yeah, that's an intriguing one. Yeah.
And how that fits into our own evolution.
Yeah, it's still a problematic open area as to what exactly it is. So there's the one group talking about it, and there I think Jerry Coyne did a post on it now because it's quite curious. This little purple blob that was shown in one artist's rendition, I was thinking, oh, gee, Mitch McConnell in his sessile state.
Well, it didn't have a turtleneck, but
yeah. Well, there we go.
I mean, it's interesting because there are all those stem lineages. Certainly, a bunch of them were in the Cambrian, were in the Precambrian, but the crown lineages didn't appear until the Cambrian. And so it leaves a lot of questions as to what exactly did the ancestors look like? What were the ancestors of preapulids? Because the Cambrian's actually defined by a preapulid fossil, Treptichnus pedum. And so you what do pre-arthropods look like? What do preapulids look like, and all this sort of stuff? And that's kind of a head scratcher because a lot of them would have been soft-bodied organisms, and all we get are
think I firmly think that most of the progress here will be made paleogenomically. That as they get more and more understanding of how the cis regulatory systems interact and how the homeobox genes are, and as they start thinking through and making more headway as to working out what proto-HOX looked like and what dynamics that was going on to get a running start. Now, I don't necessarily think this is going to be resolved like in the next 10 years. This may take much longer than that, but nevertheless, that area, the odds of finding convenient, squishy Lagerstätten fossils to preserve the things you need still can't tell you what's going on in the genes.
Right.
And so the fact that you can work backwards theoretically from the genes, gradually piecing all this stuff together, it's just only a matter of time, and it'll be an awful lot of Nobel Prizes to come out of that kind of work.
And none of them to creationists.
No, and none of them, and we can guarantee that, yes, that 0% of the groundbreaking work will be performed by any young Earth creationist, or for that matter, any anti-evolutionist.
Yeah.
We can already say that on the systematics front, that no anti-evolutionist has contributed diddly squat to anybody's understanding of the systematics of anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, at any rate, it's 10:30 here, so thanks for coming on, RJ. I enjoy talking to you as always, and I needed someone to bounce things off of after the
To wind
talk.
down on. Well, you acquitted yourself well on that, and I think it was you were having such interesting pushback and discussion with Steve, as they would have the insides where he's just kind of sitting there like a potted plant, able to contribute absolutely nothing. And so he was showing by his silence that there is no there in creationism. He doesn't think about anything. He doesn't understand anything.
Chris,
He
yeah.
can't be anticipating anything.
Yeah.
It's just plain useless, and even worse, it's boring.
Yeah. Yeah, but at any rate, so yeah, thanks for coming on. I had a good time, and so I'll be on EH this week. I just looked at my work schedule, so I'll be there. And thanks everybody for watching. TD and Matthew and Vandalia and Vodka Vision and everybody else. Thank you. Have a nice night, everybody.
Yeah. Stay safe and don't take any wooden penguins.